Let's talk about another feature of standard form categorical syllogisms that you can use to help you determine whether or not a given syllogism is valid or invalid. This feature is not as simple or as intuitive as mood, but it's also not terribly complicated. And once you get a sense of what's going on here and how this feature works, you're going to have no trouble using it to help you to evaluate arguments. Every standard form categorical syllogism has what's called a figure. Figure refers to the location of the two middle terms. Remember, every standard form categorical syllogism has three terms. It has a minor term, a major term, and a middle term. And the middle term appears in both premises and not the conclusion. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to explain to you how to use this chart that represents the four possible figures that a standard form categorical syllogism can have. The chart also appears in your course text and in your chapter summary handouts. All right. In each one of these figures, you see that the subject and predicate terms of the conclusion is indicated by S and P. And you can see in each one of these figures that S, the subject of the conclusion, also appears somewhere in the second premise. And you can see that the predicate term, the major term of the argument, also appears in each one of these figures somewhere in the first premise. And you can also see that the middle terms appear in different locations in each one of these figures. So if you look at a standard form categorical syllogism and you see that the middle term appears in the subject position of the first premise and the predicate position of the second premise, that syllogism is in figure 1. But if you look and see that the middle term appears in the predicate positions of both the first and second premise, that syllogism is in figure 2. And if you look to see that the middle term appears in the subject position of both the first and second premises, that syllogism is in figure 3. And then finally, if the middle term appears in the predicate of the first premise and the subject position of the second premise, that syllogism is in figure 4. Now, a helpful way to kind of think about these different figures is this. Connect the middle terms with a line and look at the shape of the line. How does it seem to be connecting those two middle terms? If it's sloping downward from left to right, that's figure 1. But if it's sloping upward from left to right, that's figure 4. If it appears as a horizontal line next to the predicate terms, that's figure 2. And if it appears as a horizontal line next to the subject term, that's figure 3. Now with this, you can very easily identify the figure of a given syllogism. So here's a syllogism. All dogs are canines. All beagles are dogs. All beagles are canines. Now you could look at this and do the sort of the technical approach here. My middle term dogs appears in the subject position of my first premise and the predicate position of my second premise. Which one of these figures has that? Oh yeah, it's figure 1. I could also, though, just draw a line with my pencil, connecting those two middle terms and look at its shape. And here I see this line connecting the middle terms is sloping from left to right downward. That tells me figure 1. No circles or squares. Some squares are cookies. Therefore, some cookies are not circles. All right, my middle term, squares. Let's just connect it with our line and look at its shape. Oh, I see. It's going upward. It's sloping upward from left to right. That looks like figure 4. This syllogism is in figure 4. No cats are canines. All dogs are canines. No dogs are cats. What's my middle term? Canines. Let's draw a line connecting it. Aha, I have a line right on the side of my predicate terms of the first and second premise. That's figure 2. Can you guess what the next one's going to be? All ducks are quackers. Some ducks are Quakers. Some Quakers are quackers. That's kind of a mouthful. All right. So I've got my line connecting my middle terms. They're in the subject position. You guessed it. That's figure 3. All right. So now we're going to look at how we can use mood and figure in combination to determine whether or not arguments are valid or invalid.